guys, here we are, our first day reading The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making, and I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite books ever, and I'm so excited to be able to share it with you guys. So, if the bird will allow, I shall begin. The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. For all those who walked this strange road with me, and held out their hands while I faltered, this is a ship of our own making. And we start with the dramatis personae, so to introduce us to all the characters. So we have September, a young girl, her mother, her father, the green wind, a harsh air, the leopard of little breezes, his steed, Hello, a witch, Goodbye, her sister, also a witch, Many thanks, their husband, also a witch, and additionally a werewolf, A through L, a wyvern, Lie, a golem, Good Queen Mallow, former ruler of Fairyland, Charlie Crunch Crab, a fairy, several Glashton, the Marquis, current ruler of Fairyland, Iago, the panther of rough storms, Saturday, a Merid, Calpurnia Farthing, a fairy, Penny Farthing, her ward, numerous velocipedes, Dr. Fallow, a Spriggan, Rubido, a graduate student, also a Spriggan, Cintrus, an alchemical genius, a Spriggan as well, Death, two lions, both blue, Mr. Map, the royal cartographer, Nor, a Nasnus, an unfortunate fish, a shark, actually a puka, Hannibal, a pair of shoes, and Gleam, a lamp. Chapter 1, and there's the picture for you. There you go. Chapter 1, Exeunt on a Leopard, in which a girl named September is spirited off by means of a leopard, learns the rules of Fairyland, and solves a puzzle. Once upon a time, a girl named September grew very tired indeed of her parents' house, where she washed the same pink and yellow teacups and matching gravy boats every day, slept on the same embroidered pillow, and played with the same small and amiable dog. Because she had been born in May, and because she had a mole on her left cheek, and because her feet were very large and ungainly, the green wind took pity on her and flew to her window one evening just after her 12th birthday. He was dressed in a green smoking jacket and a green carriage driver's cloak, with green jodhpurs and green snowshoes. It is very cold above the clouds in the shanty towns where the six winds live. You seem an ill-tempered and irascible enough child, said the green wind. How would you like to come away with me and ride upon the leopard of little breezes and be delivered to this great sea which borders Fairyland? I am afraid I cannot go in, as harsh airs are not allowed, but I would be happy to deposit you upon the perverse and perilous sea. Oh yes, breathed September, who disapproved deeply of pink and yellow teacups and also of small and amiable dogs. Well then, come and sit by me, and do not pull too harshly on my leopard's fur, as she bites. September climbed out of her kitchen window, leaving a sink full of soapy pink and yellow teacups with leaves still clinging to their bottoms in portentous shapes. One of them looked a bit like her father in his long coffee-colored trench coat, gone away over the sea with a rifle and gleaming things on his hat. One of them looked a bit like her mother, bending over a stubborn airplane engine in her work overalls, her arm muscles bulging. One of them looked a bit like a squashed cabbage. The green wind held out his hand, snug in a green glove, and September took both his hands, and a very deep breath. One of her shoes came loose as she hoisted herself over the sill, and this will become important later, so let us remember to bid farewell to her prim little Mary Jane with its brass buckle as it clatters onto the parquet floor. Goodbye, shoe. September will miss you soon. Now, said the green wind, when September was firmly seated in the curling emerald saddle, her hands knotted in the leopard's spotted pelt, there are important rules in Fairyland, rules from which I shall one day be exempt when my papers have been processed at last, and I am possessed of the golden ring of diplomatic immunity. I am afraid that if you trample upon these rules, I cannot help you. You may be ticketed or executed, depending on the mood of the Marquis. Is she very terrible? The green wind frowned into his brambly beard. All little girls are terrible, he admitted finally, but the Marquis, at least, has a very fine hat. Tell me the rules, said September firmly. Her mother had taught her chess when she was small, and she felt that if she could remember which way knights ought to go, she certainly could remember fairy rules. First, No iron of any kind is allowed. Customs is quite strict on this point. Any bullets, knives, maces, or jacks you might have on your person will be confiscated and smelted. Second, the practice of alchemy is forbidden to all except young ladies born on Tuesdays. I was born on a Tuesday. It is certainly possible that I knew that, the Green Wind said, with a wink. Third, aviary locomotion is permitted only by means of leopard or licensed ragwort stock. If you find yourself not in possession of one of these, kindly confine yourself to the ground. Fourth, all traffic travels widdershins. Fifth, rubbish takeaway occurs on second Fridays. Sixth, all changelings are required to wear identifying footwear. Seventh, and most important, you may in no fashion cross the borders of the worsted wood. You will either perish most painfully or be forced to sit through a tedious tea service with several Spencer hamadryads. These laws are sacrosanct, except for visiting dignitaries and spriggans. Do you understand? September, I promise you, tried very hard to listen, but the rushing winds kept blowing her dark hair in her face. I think so, she stammered, pulling her curls away from her mouth. Obviously, the eating or drinking of fairy foodstuffs constitutes a binding contract to return at least once a year in accordance with seasonal myth cycles. September started. What? What does that mean? The Green Wind stroked his neatly pointed beard. It means eat anything you like, precious cherry child. He laughed like the whistling air through high branches. Sweet as cherries, bright as berries, the light of my moony sky. The leopard of Little Breezes yawned up, and farther off from the rooftops of Omaha, Nebraska, to which September did not even wave goodbye. One ought not to judge her. All children are heartless. They have not yet grown a heart, which is why they can climb tall trees and say shocking things and leap so very high that grown-up hearts flutter in terror. Hearts weigh quite a lot. That is why it takes so long to grow one. But, as in their reading and arithmetic and drawing, different children proceed at different speeds. It is well known that reading quickens the growth of a heart like nothing else. Some small ones are terrible and fey, utterly heartless. Some are dear and sweet and hardly heartless at all. September stood very generally in the middle on the day the Green Wind took her, somewhat heartless and somewhat grown. And so September did not wave goodbye to her house or her mother's factory, puffing white smoke far below her. She did not even wave goodbye to her father when they passed over Europe. You and I might be shocked by this, but September had read a great number of books and knew that parents were only angry until they had discovered that their little adventurer had been to Fairyland and not the corner pub. And then everything is all right. Instead, she looked straight into the clouds until the wind made her eyes water. She leaned into the leopard of Little Breezes, whose pelt was rough and bright, and listened to the beating of her huge, thundering heart. If you don't mind me asking, Sir Wind, said September after a respectable amount of time had passed, how does one get to Fairyland? After a while, we shall certainly pass India and Japan and California and simply come round to my house again. The Green Wind chuckled. I suppose that would be true if the earth were round. I'm reasonably sure it is. Now, you're going to have to stop that sort of backward, old-fashioned thinking, you know. Conservatism is not an attractive trait. Fairyland is a very scientific place. We subscribe to all the best journals. The leopard of Little Breezes gave a light roar. Several small clouds skipped huffily out of their path. The earth, my dear, is roughly trapezoidal, vaguely rhomboid, a bit of a tesseract, and altogether grumpy when its fur is stroked the wrong way. In short, it is a puzzle, my autumnal acquisition, like the interlocking silver rings your Aunt Margaret brought back from Turkey when you were 9. How did you know about my Aunt Margaret? Exclaimed September, holding her hair back with one hand. I happened to be performing my usual noontime dust-up just then. You wore a black skirt. She wore a black skirt. You wore your yellow dress with the monkeys on it. Harsh airs have excellent memories for things that they have ruffled. September smoothed the lap of her now wrinkled and rumpled orange dress. She liked anything orange. Leaves, some moons, marigolds, chrysanthemums, cheese, pumpkins, both in pie and out, orange juice, marmalade. Orange is bright and demanding. You can't ignore orange things. She once saw an orange parrot in the pet store and had never wanted anything so much in her life. She would have named it Halloween and fed it butterscotch. Her mother said butterscotch would make the bird sick, and besides, the dog would certainly eat it up. September never spoke to the dog again, on principle. The puzzle is not unlike those rings, said the Green Wind, tipping his gaze over his green spectacles. We are going to unlock the earth, and lock it up again, and when we have done it, we shall be in another ring, which is to say, Fairyland. It won't be long now. And indeed, in the icy blue clouds above the world, a great number of rooftops began to peek out. They were all very tall and rickety. Cathedral towers made of nailed boards, cupolas of rusted metal, obelisks of tattered leaves, and little more. Huge domes like the ones September had seen in books about Italy, but with many of their bricks punched out, broken, turned to dust. Just the sorts of buildings where the winds howl hardest, whistles scream loudest, screams highest. The tips and tops of everything were frozen, including the folk that flew and flittered through the town, bundled up tight, much like the green wind himself, their jodhpurs and jackets black or rosy or yellow, their cheeks puffed out and round, like the cherubs blowing at the corners of old maps. Welcome, September, to the city of Westerly, my home, where live all the 6 winds in nothing at all like harmony. It's very nice and very cold, and I seem to have lost one of my shoes. The green wind looked down at September's toes, which were beginning to turn slightly purple. Being at least a bit of a gentleman, he shuffled off his smoking jacket and guided her arms into it. The sleeves were far too big, and the jacket had learned a drop or two of manners from its travels, and adjusted itself around September's little body, puffing up and drawing in until it was quite like her own skin. "I think I look a little like a pumpkin," whispered September, secretly delighted. "I'm all green and orange." She looked down. On her wide emerald velvet lapel, the jacket had grown a little orange brooch for her, a jeweled key. It sparkled as though made out of the sun itself. The jacket warmed slightly with bashfulness, and with hoping she'd be pleased. "The shoe is a very great loss, I won't lie," clucked the green wind. "But one must make sacrifices if one is to enter Fairyland." His voice dropped confidentially. "Westerly is a border town, and the red wind is awfully covetous. Terribly likely your shoe would have been stolen eventually anyway." The green wind and September entered Westerly smoothly, the leopard of Little Breezes being extra careful not to jostle the landing. They strode down Squamish thoroughfare, where big-cheek blue and golden winds went about their grocery shopping, piling their arms with tumbleweeds for rich, thorny salads. Clouds spun and blew down the street, the way old paper blows in cities that you and I have seen. They were headed for 2 spindly pillars at the end of the thoroughfare, pillars so enormous that September could not see right away that they were actually people, incredibly tall and thin, with their huge faces, and long. She could not tell if they were men or women, but they were hardly thicker than a pencil, and taller than any of the bell towers and the high platforms of Westerly. Their feet went straight down through the clouds, disappearing in a puff of cumulus. They both wore thin circular glasses, darkened to keep out the bright westerly sun. "Who are they?" whispered September. "That's Latitude with the yellow belt, and Longitude with the paisley cravat. We can't get very far without them, so be polite." "I thought Latitude and Longitude were just lines on maps." "They don't like to have their pictures taken. That's how it is with famous folks. Everyone wants to click, click, click away at you. It's very annoying. They made a bargain with the Cartographers Guild several hundred years ago. Symbolic representations only, out of respect, you understand." September felt very quiet in front of Latitude and Longitude. Being young, she was used to most people being taller than she was, but this was of another order entirely, and she hadn't eaten anything since breakfast, and travel by leopard was very tiring. She didn't think she ought to curtsy, as that was old-fashioned, so she bowed from the waist. The green wind looked amused and copied her bow. Latitude yawned. The inside of his mouth was bright blue, the color of the ocean on school maps. Longitude sighed, in a bored sort of way. "Well, you wouldn't expect them to speak, would you?" The green wind looked slightly embarrassed. "They're celebrities. They're very private." "I thought you said there would be a puzzle," said September, catching Latitude's yawn. The green wind picked at his sleeve, as though miffed that she were not more impressed. "When you solve a jigsaw puzzle," he said, "how do you do it, pumpkin dear?" September shuffled her cold foot on the smooth blue stone of the thoroughfare. "Well, you start with the corners, and then you fill in the edges to make a frame, and then work inward until all the pieces fit." And historically, how many winds are there? September thought back to her book of myths, which had been bright orange, and therefore one of her favorite possessions. 4, I think. The green wind grinned, his green lips curling under a green moustache. Quite so, green, red, black, and gold, and of course those are roughly family designations like Smith or Gupta. And actually there is also silver and blue, but they've made trouble off the coast of Tunisia and have had to go to bed without supper. So the fact remains, today we are the Corners. He gestured at the placid latitude and longitude. They are the edges, and you, September, he gently pulled a strand of September's hair free from her brooch, are the middle pieces, all funny-shaped and stubborn. I don't understand, sir. Well, it's all in the verbiage. One of the pieces is a girl hopping widdershins on 1 foot, 9 revolutions. 1 is wear motley colors. 1 is clap hand over 1 eye. 1 is give up something. 1 is have a feline in attendance. But that's easy. Mostly easy. But Fairyland is an old place, and old things have strange hungers. One of the last pieces is, there must be blood. The other is, tell a lie. September bit her lip. She had never been fond of jigsaw puzzles, even though her grandmother loved them and glued 1,000 pieces all over the house as a kind of wallpaper. Slowly, trying to remember it all, she clapped 1 hand over her eye. She raised 1 foot and hopped in what she hoped was widdershins around the leopard of little breezes. Her orange dress flapped against the green jacket shining in the sun. When she stopped, September unfastened the jeweled orange key from her lapel and pricked her finger sharply with its pin. Blood welled up and dripped onto the blue stones. She laid the key gently at the feet of the impassive latitude and longitude and took a deep breath. I want to go home, she lied softly. Latitude and longitude turned smoothly towards each other, as though they were on pedestals. They began to bend and fold like staircases, reaching out for each other and interlocking, hand into hand, foot into knee, arms akimbo. They moved mechanically in their strange circus dance, jerkily, joints swinging like dolls. The street shook a little, and then was still. Ever so briefly, latitude and longitude kissed, and when they parted there was a space between their mouths just large enough for a leopard carrying a harsh air and a little girl. All September could see on the other side were clouds. Solemnly, the green wind held out his gloved hand to the girl in orange. Well done, September, he said, and lifted her onto the leopard's emerald saddle. One can never see what happens after an exeunt on a leopard. It is against the rules of theatre. But cheating has always been in the purview of fairies, and as we are about to enter their domain, we ought to act in accordance with local customs. For, you see, when September and the green wind had gone through the puzzle of the world, on their great cat, the jeweled key rose up and swooped in behind them, as quiet as you like. So that was our first chapter. Let me know if you enjoyed it, and tune in next time.